South African corporate governance is entering a strict transitional window. On October 31st, the Institute of Directors in South Africa and the King Committee introduced the fifth iteration of their landmark code. The mandate targets the geographic and economic core of the country's financial centers. King v takes full legal effect for financial years beginning on or after January 1, 2026. The code streamlines the governance framework from 17 principles down to 13. Yet the required compliance standard is significantly sharper. The mechanics of this framework break from previous standards by dismantling the intent-based model of governance. Under the old system, a board could often satisfy compliance by pointing to a drafted policy or the adoption of a specific procedure. Intent was enough. King v replaces that with a strict outcomes-driven disclosure model. Boards must now provide empirical, measurable evidence that their governance practices actually generated the results they were designed to achieve. Treating this transition as a routine compliance update misreads the burden of proof. Directors are now directly liable for the operational reality of their decisions, rather than their documented intentions. Historically, corporate boards have treated technology as an operational concern, a downstream tool rather than a strategic pillar. This framing created a culture of delegation. Ultimate accountability for technology systems was routinely handed down to the Chief Information Officer or Chief Technology Officer. Boards operated under the assumption that hiring specialized technical executives shielded them from direct liability when systems failed. In a traditional hierarchy, technology oversight is filtered and diluted as it moves up the chain of command, isolating the board from the raw data. King v dismantles this structure. It elevates the oversight of data and artificial intelligence, locking them into the top tier of governance alongside finance and audit. Technological literacy is categorized as a direct, board-level accountability. It cannot be delegated downwards. For artificial intelligence, relying on management to handle the technical details is no longer a valid operating procedure. Under the new code, failing to directly govern these systems is an explicit breach of a director's fiduciary duty. The legal mechanism forcing this structural shift is located in Principle 10 of the Code. The text states that the governing body must govern data, information, and technology. The second half of the clause provides the critical operational condition. This governance must enable the organization to sustain and optimize its strategy and objectives. This specific phrasing upgrades data and artificial intelligence into a standalone governance pillar. This new pillar does not exist in isolation. It functions as an anchor point that connects to established legal frameworks across the country. Principle 10 interacts directly with the strict data privacy and security mandates of COPIA. For publicly traded companies, it links tightly with the JSE listings requirements. In regulated industries like banking, healthcare, and fintech, the pillar meshes directly with rigorous sectoral standards. The interlocking nature of these regulations means that failing to meet the Principle 10 standard risks a cascading series of compliance failures across the entire financial profile of the firm. This presents a severe operational dilemma for most boards. How exactly do directors legally govern an autonomous system they do not fully understand? The code requires boards to view an AI system not as a static piece of software, but as a continuous life cycle of data processing and decision-making. The first phase of required accountability targets the foundational logic and design of the models. The second phase scrutinizes what the artificial intelligence executes in real time. The third phase demands oversight of the immediate, tangible outputs generated by the system. The final phase evaluates the long-term outcomes and impacts on the business and its stakeholders. To govern this life cycle, King v introduces an explicit mechanical requirement for AI systems, the human override mechanism. No artificial intelligence model can legally operate under this framework without a formalized manual escalation pathway triggered when risk thresholds are breached. Crucially, this override pathway must bypass standard management protocols and terminate directly in board-level visibility. The robustness of these manual controls must scale proportionately to the level of risk the system poses to the organization and its stakeholders. If a board cannot interrogate how an algorithm is tested for bias or articulate the exact procedure for manually disabling it during a crisis, they are not governing the system. They are merely hoping it does not fail. There is a severe structural vulnerability between the legal mandate King v now imposes and the operational reality of current boardrooms. This chart plots recent corporate director survey data compiled by McKinsey, detailing global board competency regarding artificial intelligence. The data shows that 2/3 of global directors report having limited to zero knowledge or experience with AI. For nearly 1/3 of these boards, artificial intelligence does not even appear on their formal agendas. Furthermore, only 13% of S&P 500 companies have at least one director with actual AI-related expertise. If the most scrutinized corporate boards in the world are operating with this level of exposure, South African boards are facing an immediate competency crisis heading into 2026. The consequences of this gap are already materializing. Recent surveys show that 55% of directors now believe at least one of their peers should be replaced, specifically due to a lack of necessary technological expertise. True technological literacy in a boardroom does not require directors to write software. It requires the capacity to interrogate algorithmic bias, understand training data limitations, and recognize the potential for unintended system outcomes. Under King 5, this boardroom skills gap constitutes formal evidence of a governance failure, providing legal grounds for the removal of unqualified directors. For nomination committees and shareholders, the practical directive of this transition is immediate. Technological literacy must now be rigorously assessed as a primary competency, carrying the same weight as industry experience and independence. Traditionally, boards have been built entirely around directors with deep operational and financial backgrounds. Meeting the new legal standard requires a structural update to that composition, placing AI fluency directly alongside financial expertise. Securing this competency now also positions the organization to handle the more detailed regulatory frameworks currently in draft, such as the National AI Policy. Board-level AI fluency is the baseline fiduciary requirement for governing a modern organization. It is the new standard for corporate survival.